weigh in on that, it's open for feedback with or without, Excite talking about it today. I think there's already some good stuff in there. There's talking.
Yeah, and including any comments on the documentation, which may need to be updated for sure.
Yeah, thanks. So, let me
also, Chris, sorry,
Yeah.
before you go forward, make sure that you guys are watching the GitHub repo, so then you can intervene.
Yeah, let me just
Import
show
stuff.
where that happens.
Yeah.
Let me show the button. So right here, there's a button called, can everyone see? Hopefully it's called watch.
Yep.
So you just click watch.
Yep, we see it.
Okay, yeah.
And then
So
if you
that's
pull that down, does it say everything, or what's the options there that you can pull up? All activity, for example. Yeah.
Or you can customize. So, yeah. And yes, these are your comments, Chris, here on the HA one for bed. Yeah. A lot of them, actually. Thank you.
No one ever accused me of keeping my mouth closed.
Right.
So, look, someone else has already watched. So I'll share my screen. Thanks for the intro. Morning, everybody. So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So the documentation folder, I took a stab at mapping out a structure to anticipate the hopeful big growth in this repo over time. If you take a look at Sonic repo, right, it's pretty large. In fact, there's multiple projects. It's so large, it's spread out over dozens of projects. I don't know how Dash will evolve, but before this week, everything was just lumped into documentation. And people were asking questions like, what are the compliance requirements exactly, et cetera. And Silvana was asking, for example. I gave it a thought. I realized, we really need to map this out so that as documents get created, they have a home and that this thing scales. So this is what the top level documentation folder looks like now. It's divided into different categories. And there's not much in these folders yet, but over time, they probably will get filled up with lots of goodies. And I tried to break it into baseline specifications and requirements and then service specific ones, because I anticipate that there'll be new services being introduced and created even beyond these, and that each one probably needs its own sort of work area, because otherwise we'll have one giant mega directory and it'll be hard to find anything. So I've tried to go ahead.
Right, I'm agreeing with you on that.
Oh, thank you, Joe. So these, I believe, are areas where every card will have to have requirements, and both in the design and, we'll need design documents and then hard compliance requirements. And then down here, service specific, and this can grow over time. And if some of these are, incorrectly named or described, feel free to comment. And what you'll see is kind of a general structure here. There's a topic, there's a design folder, and a requirements folder. And the reason I separated those is because at some point we're going to need to have hard requirements that are well specified and easy to find and not buried and intermingled through all kinds of other places. So I wanted to make a place for these requirements to live. And I don't know what format those requirements will be stated in, but hopefully they're in some very easy to parse methods such they can be used by test cases. And this is the structure I was envisioning. There's high level documents that are, human readable, like we're doing now. There's going to be a P4 behavioral model that tries to implement and also specify the intention. And then we'll have compliance requirements. And for example, these will be hard descriptions of either behaviors and or numerical parameters like 10 million connections per second under some condition. But I imagine quite a big list of these at some point. And if you look at things like, let's say, international telecommunication standards, you'll see that there's specifications where requirements are numbered and easy to find and reference rather than being just spread throughout. I'm hoping we can have some kind of a format that we develop together that makes these requirements easy to maintain, specify, and even refer to in other places. So this is an aspirational approach here, and I'm hoping we can work together to do something. And then test cases will actually be statements of this test is going to do, verify X, Y, and Z requirements. And then there'll be actual scripts that execute those test cases. And then these scripts will produce some kinds of results. So these are automation scripts equipped. And ultimately, they'll produce human and machine readable reports of some sort. So I kind of put down some concepts here, and I'd like people to weigh in on this when you get time. It's a bit much to digest this early in the project, but I think it provides a roadmap to do this in a logical way. And we're right now in the process of working on some test scripts right now that we will donate to the community when they're ready, and they will be able to do reproducible, repeatable tests with, hard outcomes. So I'll take a break here if there's any questions.
Hey, Chris, great work. Many thanks for doing this thing. This is organizing this thing, and I actually looked at it over the weekend, and it made a lot of sense to do this way. So thanks a lot. One quick note. Much like how we have done for the documentation, do you think we want to do the same thing for the behavior models also, so we can classify them in their separate, buckets?
Well, I think the P4 behavioral model will probably be just like a P4 program that should be organized like a software project. But I guess if you want to organize it by service, it probably already is, right? There's P4 modules, or I shouldn't say module because P4 doesn't have modules exactly, but there are files, right, that implement the code. See, but that's probably something that somebody else should comment on. But I agree, it should be structured similarly.
Yeah, I think much like how you have done, because there are like 7 use cases that initially Azure put out to say, okay, we want to handle that, to start with like 7 use cases, and if we have models describing these use cases separately, then perhaps we may want to really classify them accordingly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. Does anyone who's working on the model want to comment on that? I don't know if it needs to be in separate folders because it shouldn't be that huge, right? It should just be, a reasonable number of P4 files.
We should probably, yeah, I think this is a question to the coders. Does the code actually compartmentalize like that, or is the code highly reliant on, so does SLB, is it highly reliant on VNet? And can they be compartmentalized exactly? So that's something, actually, it's a very good question to see if they can be compartmentalized like that, and or if they cannot be, then let's probably discuss, okay, what is the alternative?
I think the P4 should be all in one directory, because at the end of the day, it's all on one pipeline. It's not that you can put multiple features in multiple pipelines.
And that's my feeling as well, that you won't be able to completely separate it. But let's make it a discussion point, because we do want to be able to recognize, what pieces are for what. And let's maybe, Christina, we need to get maybe a few of the coders, like from anybody who's interested, to get in one call and then discuss that, and then try to come up with a resolution together on that one. I think, obviously Mellanox, Intel, Excite, anybody who wants, but try to make sure that the people attending are coders who actually understand that is just going, how integrated this code is, and how can it be parsed out into these services. So I would set that up. That's a really good topic, and we need to resolve that before going so far with the
if
people.
nothing else, a naming convention even would help. And,
Yeah.
and just a statement in this README, here's how it is organized and how it corresponds to the docs, right? That just conventions might be a good start.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
very
In
clever.
reality, Chris, sorry, we were just waiting for this kind of questions. So because this folder is not really organized, let's put it this way.
Yeah, it may not need much organization other than
Probably
file
not, but
So I'll
Yeah.
put a note in the README file that's in front of us that we need to figure out the organization and then pull together the people who would know the best practices for organizing, software projects like, together and get consensus, and then we'll figure it out.
and
So we can make it a goal to say within 2 weeks that all the people
yeah.
have their say on how to organize, and then just do it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it makes sense what is written down, but
Mhm.
I think we take 2 weeks to take all the input and then we just implement it. And totally agreed that that would be very good to get organized now. Otherwise, it just gets worse over time.
Mhm.
When you wait
yeah, the
too
important
long to
thing,
organize.
Gerald, the important thing is to be able to find what you need in a way that
Yes.
is logical.
yeah,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
don't worry, the P4 is not going to get that voluminous, right? It's not like a C++ project. It's a limited size by definition. So I
Perfect.
wouldn't get
Well, it depends how many features you put in it.
Yeah,
If you
Yeah.
put
yeah,
all the
I'm more worried
features in-
about. I'm actually not talking about the P4. We'll do that too, like the coding part and what the best practice for compartmentalizing that and how we can actually do that. But I'm talking about just the organization of our folders to
Yeah.
get it into a format like this after hearing the comments from the community. But make a deadline for 2 weeks to get it done.
So that was that presentation, and shortly after this restructuring was done, we already started getting some. So here's the HA document, but if you look at the pull request, let's see, or that Bud did, he's actually dropped a file into this folder, so it's already being
Used.
found and used. Yeah, it's already proving some value, right? Because it has a place to live.
Mhm.
So anyway, that was my presentation. Thanks for the feedback, and we still have some time to do some restructuring, but I'd recommend we get something and
Can I
keep
make
it.
one?
Yeah.
Chris, can you go back to the main page of Dash, and then I'm curious people's opinion here. So just go to the main page and then go to documentation folder. And then from here, we've outlined the different services in general, things in the folders. And then if you scroll down, Chris has done a lot of work to do a single click design where, if you are in data plane, in one click, you can go to the parent folder, the design, or the compliance requirements. Or alternatively, we could just do a double 2-click design where you'd have to click twice to get down into the structure. And so this is how we were using it for now. And I'm curious what everyone thought of the readability, because this is what we had agreed on.
Yeah. So in other words, there's a folder containing both design and compliance requirements for general, for example. There's not much in here, but a description of what it is. And then you have to go down here into design. And this could end up having 20 documents, right? Someday. And then, so you can kind of go to the parent folder, which isn't that interesting, or go right down to the design or compliance folder underneath. Right? Just trying to make it easy to navigate.
Right.
Because GitHub doesn't have a nice tree navigator.
Right. So what do you guys think? Anyone who is super into
enough.
structure design?
I love it. This is great.
You like it? Okay.
Yep.
And if you add a
It
new
looks
document,
easy.
Okay.
So it looks easy to navigate to me.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
thank you. And if you add a document, just throw an entry in this table, right? It's easy just to copy the folder and then copy the line and then just paste it in. Right? Looks like, the GitHub markup looks like this, right? It's pretty simple. Just copy the row and then edit it for your new document. Could be the
And we always have Michael Miele there to fix any oopses. So
Yeah, don't worry about this.
So this looks kind of big, maybe a little bit daunting at first because it's so big and there's so little actual content. But I like to think of it like planning out a city,
Yeah.
big wide roads with stoplights on every intersection, because eventually the buildings will come. And if you don't do it, it's going to look like, a cow town instead of a city. Anyway, thanks for the feedback, people.
Thanks. Okay. And Gerald, it looks like we have a issue for the fragmented packets group to go over later when we get together. Issue 61 got submitted, so.
Sure, great.
Thank you. Or Andy, do you want to talk about that now, or should we just wait?
No, I think Gerald said that Microsoft folks are going to be doing a detailed review on that document anyway. I just thought I would toss that in for more food for thought when that discussion happens.
We might as well, because we're doing it this week, so maybe let's go to the issues. This is how you navigate to issues, and then this is it, number 61, Gerald. So
yeah, it's fairly detailed on a couple of the statements made there, so it might not be worth doing in this meeting live unless you get into it.
Seems to be assuming that the temporal flows can be associated with a 5 tuple. That is true if the first fragment arriving for one original unfragmented packet contains the L4 header. I would.
So that's the whole point of this, is that in the first packet there is the layer 4, and so you will already have a fast path for this, or you will create one at this point. But let's assume we already had a fast path created. So in other words, the flow table has already been created. Now you're receiving your first packet of a fragmented packet. Well, that's already in the flow table. And what it has is it has the fragment ID in it. So now you have to create a temporary flow table entry that looks for the source destination and this ID, fragment ID, as its classification, which is equivalent to the layer 4 classification now, because the ID is unique to that fragment. By doing that, that will only last for the duration of till the end of packet, and then it will be removed. But what it doesn't need is it doesn't need you to do the slow path. So just because you don't see the layer 4 in the subsequent packets, you already have a connection, and you've already associated that connection with the fragment ID and source destination. And therefore, that's the only thing you need to match on to classify it, and therefore it'll always stay in the fast path. It's just that these entries will be spun up very quickly and spun down very quickly as the fragmented packet completes. So that's the my suggestion, and it's going to be reviewed by data path engineers for accuracy.
And that all sounds
Of course,
great.
the CPS will be lower.
Except when a non-first fragment arrives to
The
the device.
CPS will be lower, but wait a second, only slightly lower, because we're not doing the slow path. We're simply adding a flow. So will it be lower? Yes. Will it be equivalent to going to slow path? No. It's not the same thing. Slow path
I
has a
agree,
lot of lookup.
but you have
That's
an
a given,
overhead that is equivalent to creating a connection.
Yeah, it's a given that it will be slower. That's the non-benefit of a fragmented packet, which is why we don't see very many in our network.
Andy, you were saying something? Sorry.
Sure. The detailed question is, there's nothing requiring, I mean, a device can receive a fragment that's not the one with the L4 header first. And the question is, what do you want to happen then? Can we just drop it on the floor?
Yeah. Yep. And in
So
fact,
I'd recommend saying
the
that.
other thing that it did say or didn't say.
I'd recommend saying it. I don't see it anywhere.
Okay, can you do that pull request and then we'll add it?
Sure.
There is a mention in the document. There is a mention in the document of their reorder is expected to be rare or non-existent. In other words, a device should almost never see the subsequent fragment first.
That doesn't say what the device should do.
So
True.
So we can what his is a sub case of what I mentioned, but I think we'll mention his too. An out of order, for example, doesn't really happen in network because everything is encapsulated into layer 4 on the outside, and this is the inside of the frame. And no switch actually misorders a layer 4 packet. I mean, all the hashes are done at layer 4, and in fact, they're done. And if you did misorder, we would have found it and kicked you out of the network. So we know that they don't come in misordered. In fact, if it comes in misordered, it's probably an attack. It's called fragment smack, and therefore we delete all packets that are misordered by default in our network today. So that I have checked on our implementation. That's what we do because of fragment smack. I mentioned in the document what he's saying also is just a packet comes, you've never saved it. It could be misordered, but it could also be denial of service attack. So a fragment comes without any previous notion of a layer 4, first packet ever or a connection. That will be dropped as well, but I think it's worth mentioning. It's just to further emphasize, we do not expect that, and we should drop all packets that are misordered.
So I just
and or filtered.
So Gerald, I understand what you're saying, but I just want to be a little bit careful, right? I can understand a VM generating traffic outside is rarely or never misordered, but traffic coming back in, I'm not so sure, right? Because you can get misordered, right?
No.
Go ahead.
No.
You can get misordered in a
can tell
TCP
you,
flow
I've
just
been
with a
in-
packet drop, right? A packet drop
Yeah,
due to congestion somewhere in the internet causes misorder.
that's not a misorder. That's a delete. That's a missing packet. And so
That's the same as misorder.
The receiver can't tell the difference.
it would cause your whole packet to be dropped. Like if you drop that for any reason, then the rest, obviously, you would have to retransmit it. But the point is that if it's misordered, we delete it.
Fair enough.
Question.
I guess my point though is that it's not going to be that uncommon for packets coming into the VM.
Yeah, but in the VM, they have their own TCP/IP stack, and they'll handle it as per normal. We are a bump in the wire.
One thing I don't understand is
Sure.
this. If a fragmentation happened for MPU, the number of fragments is very low. It's only typically 2. So
fragments can be low, yeah, but it's not limited to 2 fragments.
No, it's not limited to 2, but in the common case, I think it's 2. So if it is 2, is all this override worthwhile?
Oh, how you implement it in the end will be up to you. It's the behavior that you'll have to obey. The behavioral model doesn't mean that you can't come up with a better way of keeping the behavior, right? So even though we'll describe it as fast path, slow path, how you implement inside, I'm sure you'll play lots of tricks, but the test cases will be based on the behavior. You don't have to follow exactly the P4 code the way it's written. You just need to make sure that you understand that when we test, we're testing against the P4 code. So if your implementation doesn't match it, I don't care how you match it. I don't care if you use the drop of the P4 code, but the tests are all going to be based on the P4 behavioral model. So we're creating the model so it's like a description of the service, but it's not. Doesn't prevent you from doing any kind of innovation to create a more efficient way of doing fast and slow.
But
Hey,
Gerald?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry, just a quick question. As I was looking at the document, so Gerald, when you say that, new temporal flow be created with a tuple like frag ID, source, and destination, what I see is that, there is another piece of information is also available, which is protocol ID to further, do this thing. Why are we not using one more?
You're right. Can you do a pull request? I forgot. I was going to change that to include that, but I forgot. So to do a pull request, please, and just to remind us.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Gerald, I want to make a quick observation. When you guys enter an APR, it's okay to flag the problem, but if you have some ideas in mind that how can improve the document and what you think should be the description, I would suggest put information there so it would be easier, if you don't mind, when it's possible.
I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't really understand the.
No, what I was saying, no, sometime you go in the PR, you find a problem with the document. You may have a solution in mind. You may know how to fix that problem. So you may as well write it in the PR, and that would be
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Can I paraphrase that a bit? The issues are for filing, statements like such and such needs to be fixed, or I have a proposal. The PR should actually be, here's my submission to be put into the repo. It is the proposed solution. So PR shouldn't be like open-ended. Hey, let's talk about the meaning of life. It should be, here's a document change. Will you please accept it? Right. So it's already, the content you're proposing should already be there. Right. That's what the general use of PRs are. Here's a change I'm submitting for, once it's accepted, the solution is at hand. That makes sense?
Yep. So it sounds like we have two potential PRs coming into Gerald's document. One with the one we just talked about, the IP, and the other one from Andy to definitively say whether we want to support for a long time the whatever you said in the issue. I have to look it back up. Do we want to handle fragmented packs at line rate indefinitely? Do the explicit statements. So you guys are going to do that. Okay. Is that an agreement? Two people, we're going to create a pull request?
I've agreed to create a pull request as I just did on the issue, but
we
the
are,
other one,
we are not asking. So that one is just, yes, we do. And usually when somebody asks that, it's like, we're not going to buffer these things off the side or anything like that. Like, I think that was suggested that last week. It should be handled line rate. There's a fairly straightforward way of handling it line rate, and that's described. We'll update the description. And I will do these updates for the, receiving a fragment from nowhere, basically, one that hasn't even got a connection or a start. And also including the protocol ID. I will add that because we're going to review this as well this week, and so it's just easy for me to add that in. I would still do the pull requests if you don't mind, but I'll try to add that in the documents in parallel. Just so other people see that the discussion occurred and who input the discussion and the resolution. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I don't mind putting, doing the pull request. So we'll do that.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just going to
make
it.
I think the last one that wasn't discussed in there that I am still looking at how we handle out of order packets, even though they're not supposed to be out of order, at the ending of a fin. I think there's an exception there that has nothing to do with really out of order so much as packets arriving after the fact, which can happen. And I drew one example in the document of how that can happen, but we will have another meeting on that just to make sure that we have it, the handling correct. I think Intel said that they would describe what they do.
Great. So it looks like next week we'll be talking to NVIDIA and hopefully Excite. And anything else for this week, guys? I think I've covered what I wanted to cover.
I had one quick question.
Go for it, Chris.
After we've made the changes to the packet handling, fragment handling document, we should ask what folder should it live in so that we set a precedent, because right now it's in this general design folder.
Yeah.
And
do you want it in data plane?
Well, I'm going to get an opinion from people. If we're going to start having more and more documents talking about deep stuff like that, we might want to put it in another place. And that could be a final, just a move at the end. Does anyone have an opinion on that? So we set a precedent.
So these are the available choices right now of where it could land. Team. This is where it is right now, general.
Anyone have any strong opinions or any
Yeah.
opinion?
Maybe the data plane. I don't know. I think just classified in the data plane.
But over time, we'll probably have a lot more in that
Gerald,
category.
since you're writing it, do you feel it should go in the data plane folder?
Which document are you talking about?
The one you're writing, the fragmented packets.
Oh, I guess that would be a good place to put it, but
Right now it's in general, and we'll keep it
I,
there until
I
you're finished.
actually, I think the document I wrote was just my attempt to explain what should be done or could be done to deal with the fragment packets. I would still think that that's going to go into the VNet behavioral model. So I'm not sure it's, which is kind of the base model for everything. So I'm not sure. It could go into data plane, but the reality is the code, the P4 code to handle fragments would be inside of the VNet
VNet to VNet.
model. Yeah. And that's going to go back also to, I would table it for a little bit later. That's going to go to how do we compartmentalize the code? So this could live within the VNet model, but I think if I was, I'd rather listen to the data path coders to say like where it really should live. Like, should this be something that is used in all the models, something that's, you know, in the base model? Is it, I mean, I don't know how the P4 code is going to be structured in the end. And so it's hard for me to say like where this is, you know, needs to be transformed into, for sure, into the behavioral model. And I think we need a little bit more discussion on how those behavioral models are going to coexist and what the kind of structure of that will be. So that's why it's hard for me to answer that question.
Okay,
I think
we can
need
table it.
a
That's
little
fine.
more discussion on how that's going to be created.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Oh, Andy, do you have another question?
Completely, well, not completely, but yeah, different question. No fragments, I
Shifting
promise.
gears. Shifting gears.
There was some discussion, I think last time we met, and I didn't follow it very well, about what form of TCP sequence number tracking or checking might Dash might want to require. There's not much mentioning sequence in the current Dash repo. Is that something that should be fleshed out a bit more about what the requirements are there?
So I can tell you that in a regular TCP stream, forget about fragments for a second, we don't care. We're like a switch. We're like in between, like switches don't care about sequence numbers either. And, you know, they determine where the packet's supposed to go. They do firewall filters, but in the end, they don't look at sequence numbers to determine whether they pass the packet. It's very similar here. We're not the endpoints, so we're not reassembling. And I think it's our job to interfere with any of that process. So in a regular flow, like we don't really need to sequence. Whether we need to, in the fragmentation, it's a little different on how we're going to identify that. But for regular TCP, we don't need to, we don't care. The endpoints have to care about that.
That there is one, in the Sirius pipeline README, there's a mention, one sentence. Sequence number tracking for fin and final ACK already started. No further description. That's what led to my question. Part. Is that,
I don't know.
That's more related to ending a connection than it is general sequence.
Yeah, actually, we're having a and Christina, others can be. Well, let's have the meeting first, and then we'll discuss that. We are having a discussion on closing of connections, just to make sure that corner cases are actually covered properly, because it's easy to write down what the normal case is, but there's a bunch of corner cases, and we're trying to go through them, and that should answer your question. when we get to that. And I hope by next week we'll have already had that meeting and we can write down the thoughts there. Because we have some examples in the world that, you know, have already done this before. So we're trying to learn off that and make sure that we're using best practices for ending that connection and its corner cases. So I think it'll be answered. I think your question will be answered out of that discussion.
Okay, thanks.
It's a good point, though, if it's a blank. Which document was it in? That's not.
The Serious Pipeline README just has a, I can put into, I'll put the link into the chat if you want to.
Okay.
It's kind of a quick mention without any follow-up at the current time that I can see.
Okay. Working on it.
Sure.
Or Intel's working on it, actually, more than me.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Like I said, I have to.
The other thing I'm going to do to try to in our network, we do handle fragmented packets, and VMs can fragment packets. As an action on our side, I need, even for myself, to figure out how often does this happen. Doesn't mean we don't need to cover the case, but I kind of want to know, even for myself, how often is this actually happening where VMs fragment packets, because there's no upside to it, in my opinion. And yet it still does exist and we still have to cover it. But I'd like to know, is it like 1%, 0.001%? We'll try to figure out a way. Christina, maybe we can take that action down, try to figure out a way that we can determine how much of this is actually in our network.
I suspect it's probably almost always UDP, and it's because there are applications that break if fragments aren't allowed, probably for large datagrams. But that's a guess. Yeah,
well, I know it exists. That I know, and we do cover it. It's a matter of trying to determine how much does this affect our performance. Probably it's not very prevalent, in which case, you know, overall it's not going to affect our performance that much, even though we have to cover the case. But still, it's good to know that kind of stuff, and we'll try to glean it out of any logs that we can get out of our network, just to share that.
If you find it's really low, like 50,000 packets a device or less, and a data plane dash device can drop any fragments received faster than that, that opens up lots of possibilities for implementation. I'll keep saying it again until I'm heard.
I'm sorry, say it again. What is your worry?
I'm saying a dash product designer has many more degrees of freedom in how they design a product if you can promise that we can drop any more than, say, 50,000 fragments per second and don't have to handle them, because then we don't need to do it in the fast path.
Yeah, but I can't say that. We handle it within our existing implementations today. But again, let's do the first thing. Let's find out how much there is. I don't know. So I'm curious too, like how much is real?
Which has poor price power performance, which is why we're here.
Yeah. Yep. Actually, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. In the end, when I looked into it, I thought it would be a bigger deal until I looked into it and said, oh, that's not that big of a deal. It's not like you have to do slow path over. You're literally just creating a new entry for a little bit. That does take overhead, but the complexity of doing it is not that big.
There are application level firewalls that do this in extremely complex ways to try to handle different host behavior for IP reassembly. You don't want to go there, I don't think.
Yeah, but we don't do reassembly, remember. We are a bump in a wire. And that's why we're not trying to be an end device. We are bumping a wire in the middle of the network that never reassembles anything.
They're extremely security conscious devices that try to take into, like, different end host stacks do IP reassembly different. And if you're trying to protect against attacks on multiple different host stacks, there are network devices that actually try to do different things depending upon which host they're protecting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we want to go there, and I'm glad we're not going there.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You know, and we actually, Gerald, we have I call it a Q&A with SDN Engineering. We have a sync with them today, and Michael accepted, so we can talk to him.
About
Fragments, just the questions that have come up here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't think he's
If
the
he
right
knows.
person to talk to. That's why I did it.
Yeah,
So,
he directed us,
uh,
yeah. But
yeah,
he
but
may
we
have a
could,
pointer to figure out like a query that we can do or something.
oh yeah, for identifying how many fragment the
Exactly.
packets we have in our network, that's something that we can probably glean right out of our switches. But yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. That's funny, Joe. Is it Joe or Joseph? Dealing with fragmentation is so old school. I guess we are all super old school on this call. So
No, I'm listening
Well,
to the conversation. And I'm like, this isn't just TCP reordering and TCP drops and all of that. And this is like true like IP fragments and all of the junk in the IP header that we all know and love. It's impressive.
No. You say we all know and love. I actually had to go and open up my old TCP/IP book.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, 20 years ago, this was like really a thing, or 25 now, I guess.
Yeah.
This was like really a thing, and you had to like really think about these things because, the packet size on the networks was all over the place, and
Yep.
jumbo frames weren't a thing, and this is taking me back.
BNC connector, ISDN, and frame relay days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
And token, go back to token ring, and bridges between
Yeah.
protocols.
You're reminding us of all the nightmares that used to exist back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a tiny fraction,
And also how old we are.
That's
I
right.
know.
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah, you're right, Silvano. But anyway,
those nightmares still exist,
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Don't know that.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from this is that we have corner case applications that have to deal with some very specific kinds of error handling and network protection from a gateway perspective. And so when we consider the DPU as a gateway, we've got a number of kinds of corner cases that DPUs acting as a gateway will have to deal with. And we need the models defined for those and the P4 pipeline behaviors defined for those in a way that won't screw up the endpoints, but won't allow junk traffic in through the gateways when they're not supposed to. Is that a proper high-level understanding of what we've been talking about?
Yeah. Plus the security of, remember that the whole goal of it is to make sure that packets only arrive where they're supposed to go. But yes, absolutely what you said.
You may be quiet, but boy, when you speak up, it resonates.
Oh yeah, I'm paying attention, and we've all been around the block a few times on this kind of stuff. So, gotcha.
Totally.
And so getting those models defined correctly, and in particular on this one, the behavior part that Dash originally set out that said, look, models are great, but if you don't define the behavior with the model and the behavior of the P4 pipeline, and again, as was said, independent of the details of how it's implemented, then we're not going to have stuff that's interoperable, and we're not going to cover the gateway space correctly for Azure Cloud or anyone else, right? Because this will be used more than Azure Cloud if we're doing it. Okay, I'm on board. I
mostly
wouldn't have to deal with that, but with IP fragments, but that is a useful data point. Thank you.
So actually, the one thing I always point back to is testing. So the behavioral models have to have enough detail that the tests are created to exercise all those corner cases. And so everything will point back to eventually, you should be able to have a behavioral model. And if you understand that, and now you can make that into a software model, which just through compiling it. And then you build your test cases. Eventually, this will give us much higher quality and much higher interoperability, just like you said. But quality, making sure that if somebody says, I have a Dash compliant device, that it actually handles